Shalom and welcome to another edition of Our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah, and this week's parashat is the Passover parashat for the week of Pesach and Hag HaMatzah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And those are the readings that we're using. They start in Exodus 33:12 through 34:26 and Numbers 28:19 through 25. And my message for 2014-15 is called Show Me Now Your Way. And this message, instead of doing a long video, I cut it up into the 5 parts, the 5 bullet points that I'm going to cover. So if you haven't watched the other videos, you can see the links below. You can go to those videos, and there'll be the link for the next one as well. So far we've gone through the way before dwelling. We've gone through consider this nation as your people, and the glory, and this one's called the law and the name. So in this one, where we're going, and I'm just basically making bullet points going down the reading. So in the opening part, we saw the concept of show me now your way, where Moshe asked for that, if he's found favor in the sight. And then we got into his consider this nation your people, and the presence. And then he asked to show him his glory. We've covered that already. We're just going right down here. And we're seeing the next thing that happens here is that he's going to proclaim his name, he says, right? And he's going to put him in the rock and cover him up with his hand. I'm not going to dig into all that, but there's tons of interesting stuff there in the remez, or spiritual definitions, that are relevant. But then after that, we get the giving of the second giving of the law, right? Which in itself is prophetic of Messiah, of Mashiach, who's the second giving of the law. So all of these things, just like when it says in the New Testament, when he talks to the people on the road to Emmaus, and he says he shows them all things from the beginning, right, concerning him, from Bereshit, concerning him, right? And so when you go through this text, you can understand that there's more than just what you see on the surface, and there's all these things relate to Mashiach as well, and they're all prophetic and all that. So many people are just reading the text as if it's just the text, and that's the problem. And that's what actually I believe Paul's getting into when you get in the New Testament, which most people, even Messianics, generally misunderstand or whatnot, because he's talking a lot about the 2 witnesses and the 2 witnesses of the Torah, not whether it's one or the other, but 2 that are within the Torah, the earthly and the spiritual. And so you're going to see that we're going to talk about the law and the name, because that's the next 2 things that happen. And this segment of text is just massive, because like what you're getting the second giving of the law, you're getting Moshe asking to see the way, which Mashiach says he's the way. You get the biggest name of God in the scriptures proclaimed, because he puts them in there and he tells them he's going to proclaim his name, and then it tells us what that is. And it's not just like Yodeh-Waheh or something like that. Like I consider it kind of his proper name, because it's the full title with all the things that go along with it in Exodus 34:6 through 7. Huge amounts of things. And so we'll start off with this concept of the law, the second giving of the law, right? And his name. And what are those? How are those connected? Because a name in Hebrew also can mean authority. Now, if his name is represented as we can just go there and see it says, because in verse 34:5 it says, and Yodeh-Waheh descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of Yodeh-Waheh. And then in verse 6 it says, and Yodeh-Waheh passed before him and proclaimed. So basically it's saying the next part is the name of Yodeh-Waheh. And that's Yodeh-Waheh, Yodeh-Waheh Elohim, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving lawlessness and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the lawlessness of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the third and fourth generation. And then after that it says, and Moshe made haste and bowed his head. So that whole 2 verses right there are what I consider the proper name of Yoreh. And if you apply that as authority, what you see is that it starts off with mercy and grace, right? He's merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth. Okay? So these are all things, when it says, when it talks about by no other name can you be saved, probably want to go back to this. It doesn't mean whether his name is Jesus or not, and whether or not someone else has a name or the same name, and then, you can go back here and see, okay, so what are all these things in his name? And how are these tied to salvation? And keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving lawlessness and transgression and sin. And it will by no means clear. The guilty is in italics, but I don't have a problem with what they put in there, the guilty. Visiting the lawlessness of the fathers upon the children's children, unto the third and fourth generation. Okay? So this is interesting because you have a whole bunch of stuff here, but the authority behind this, right? Even in judgment, mercy, long-suffering, the ability to forgive lawlessness, transgression, and sin, and pardon. Okay? This is all about authority, the authority he has. The law is been established. He has the ability to show mercy. He is the judge. He has the ability to forgive, to hear a person's case, to see that person, and make a judgment call of whether or not mercy will be shown to them or not. And even, as a matter of fact, when Moshe pleads for Israel, right, and offers himself up after they made the golden calf, and he says, please pardon these people, your children Israel, and if not, blot my name out of your book. And he says, he will blot out who he will blot out, and he will show mercy to who he will show mercy. And this, he says it in multiple different places, this concept that he's the judge, and he will determine mercy. And for the people who disobey him they will blot out, right? And unless he decides to show mercy. And those are his judgments and his things. And so when we look at that can only come from authority and from the person who is the judge. And so a lot of people run around in religion and they're talking about how, say this little sinner's prayer and all your sins are forgiven. They don't have the authority to do that. They're not the judge. Even Mashiach himself, when he came, he said he wasn't the judge, but that he didn't come to judge, and he said that he was just one witness. But if he was a witness, his witness would be true, right? He says the right things, but at that time he didn't come to judge. Now, it does say that judgment will be passed unto him. And I think when he comes back he will judge, but it wasn't the right time. That's not what he was there for. And it's kind of like Yom Teruah. That's a warning. That's not Yom Kippur. It's not the judgment. It's a warning that the judgment's coming. And I think that's what was happening with Mashiach when he came the first time. And so many people think, it is finished. So all that already happened. But he's coming back, and I don't think it's for nothing. I don't think it's just to say, remember that stuff I did? This is nothing new. That's just, we're going to talk about that, or, I'm just here to collect up after that, he's still active, I believe, in fulfilling the scriptures and doing all these different things, and there's more to be done. And, you know, he said to his disciples, I would that you were one with me as I am one with the Father. Okay? I don't know that they were there yet, but that was his desire. And he said that he desired to keep Pesach with him. It's Pesach. And yet at the end he said he's not going to drink again from the fruit of the vine until he drinks it new with them in the kingdom. So there's more even for Pesach, and we didn't even get to Yom Kippur and Sukkot. You know, if he desired to celebrate Pesach with them, isn't he going to desire to celebrate Sukkot as well with his disciples? I think so. So the important thing is that this goes in, and it's interesting because we got the giving of the law, right? The second giving of the law. And then we have the proclamation of his name, which ties to authority. And what's the next thing that you have? So he said, if I have found favor in your sight, O Yodewahe, let my Adonai, I pray you, go among us. For it's a stiff-necked people, and pardon our lawlessness and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And then the next part goes into, and he said, behold, I make a covenant. So now we get into covenant. So we have the name, the law, and the name, right? And what those mean, and then we go right in to covenant. And he tells them, before all your people I will do marvels, such as not been done in all the earth nor in any nation. And all the people among which you shall see, all the people among which you are shall see the work of Yodewahe, for it is a terrible thing that I will do with you, or an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe you that which I command you this day. Okay? And what did he command? That's talking about the commandments. He's telling them, here's the covenant. Observe these commandments. Okay? And it says, before all your people I will do marvels. Okay, so actually, I'm sorry. It says, behold, I drive out before you the Amoree, the Kenny, the Hittite, Perizzee, the Hivi, and the Yebusi. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you go, lest there be a snare in the midst of you. Okay? And then he goes on to tell them to break down their altars, destroy their images, worship no other Elohim, and it goes into all these points as we're getting into this, and then it ends, interestingly, with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and a little commandment about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it's interesting that this covenant is directly tied to the law and the commandments, and the law is connected to the name and the authority. And all these, if we look at Mashiach, we see all these same things. We see that Mashiach kept the law. We see that he literally was the law. And that, as it says, his Father's name is in him. That's also the authority. And that's also all of these things. Mercy and graciousness and long-suffering, abundance, the forgiving lawlessness, all that is there. And it's not something new that just came with Mashiach. It's his Father within him. And then that leads us to the covenant. And so many people feel like, oh, like with the New Testament, oh, we're New Covenant, we're this and that. Well, then you have a covenant that goes beyond Mashiach, because Mashiach's covenant, right? He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. What was his commandments? Is he just making up his own laws and then keeping them? And somehow that's what he's talking about? When he says, I would that you were one with me, to his disciples, as I am one with the Father. You didn't just say, I would that you were one with me. He wants that relationship to be the same relationship that he has with his Father. Okay? That relationship is the keeping of those commandments. And the covenant that gets passed on to us isn't going to be a different covenant than the covenant that he has with his Father. It's the covenant that God has made with man, and that represents God's character and his name, who he is. That's what we find in the commandment and the law. It's a reflection of God. And so when people don't like the law or don't like that, they just don't like God and who God is. And Mashiach is the living Word of God. So when they talk about the law negatively, they're talking about really the essence of Mashiach, the core of who he is. That's what they're also rejecting. They're rejecting Mashiach. The same people who say that they're following him and then they reject the law are really just rejecting Mashiach, because he is the law. And that's just a basic thing that people have to understand, that the law and the name and the covenant are all connected. Hope this is a blessing. Check out the next video. It's called First Fruits and Offerings. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave comments. All right.